Commissioner Aritz. We know if you signed in yet?
I'm here.
Yep.
Ah, there we go. Got you, Tony. Commissioner Bakke is present. Commissioner Evans.
Present.
Commissioner Gibbs.
Present.
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Lalonde. We heard you. Thank you. Commissioner Smith.
Here.
And Commissioner Timbo is not present. Officially welcome, and please remember the board appreciates public participation. Thank you, public. If you have any comments throughout the board, please stand or raise your hand, state your name, address, and your comments will be heard. Board is called to order. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, starting off with the consent agenda. The consent agenda is made up of routine day-to-day items that require board action but do not appear to have a significant public impact. Items may be pulled from the consent agenda for separate discussion, vote by any board member. Today's consent agenda items are A, approval of the board meeting minutes from June. B, payroll checks totaling $104,314.04. C, maintenance operations checks number 25462 through 25512 totaling $1,613,698.26. D, approve passenger facility charge totaling $4,000. And E, financial reports for June. Do we have a...
I'll move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, do we have any discussion on the consent agenda as announced? Okay, we have a motion, a second, and no discussion items. All in favor of the consent agenda as previously stated, say aye. Aye. Any opposed with nay? And there are no nays. Thank you, Tony. I got to remember to put a pause in there for you. The consent agenda passes. Let's start off with the director's report.
Yes, welcome back, everybody, from summer recess. It's good to see everyone. We've got a lot to cover, so I'll go pretty quickly. In your board packet, you saw the financials for June. Of course, that constitutes our year-end for fiscal year 1920. As you can see in the summary page, our revenue fell short of budget by just about $435,000. That was a little better than projected, but obviously a major loss of revenue, just about 11%. I think that's a pretty good result. I think pretty happy with how that ended up. If you go down through the list of revenues versus the committed there, what you'll find is the passenger revenues are obviously where we're shy. Things like rental cars and parking and food. Most of the other revenues held up pretty well. At $3.5 million, that's still more revenue than we had about 5 years ago. So relatively speaking, the revenue growth initiatives we've had over the last few years have been a big part in helping us heal up some of this dent from the coronavirus impacts. I would expect that we could see revenue drift down another $400,000 by the end of this current fiscal year. I think as we get into September, July and August are actually not too bad, but as we get into September, October, I think we're going to see the real doldrums of activity, much like we saw back in March, where business travel is kind of slow to get back. There is increased activity in the region. I know you've seen it as well as me. We've been driving around the community. There's a lot of rental cars out there right now. There's a lot of out-of-state vehicles right now. It'll be interesting to see how that maintains over the next 2 months as we see the kids go back to school. But overall, our activity in July on the passenger side was down about 62%. That's double the activity we had in June, which again was double the activity that we had in May, which again was double the activity we had in April. So the doubling of activity continued up until July. We don't expect that will continue into August, but we do expect August we'll probably have a good 10 or 15% increase over July. For one thing, Minneapolis flight didn't start operating until August. So we know we've got more seat capacity. Looking at the July results, airlines were fairly full. United maintained a 78% load factor, which I think is excellent given they were running a three-day schedule. So that's really good. Delta and Alaska both chose to keep the middle seat vacant. So the best we could do was about a 65% load. And both of those loads were in the 50% range. So they did have some empty seats in July. We'll see how they did in August. Allegiant did the worst. Their load factors were about 40%, with Las Vegas and Phoenix hitting the difficult to fill summer months on top of the COVID impacts. And so they had a rough summer here at GTF, and we'll hope things return a little better in the future. There are some things to look forward to going forward. The Medicine Hat and Lethbridge Market have both lost Air Canada. In addition, WestJet has the most capacity increase or decreases of any North American carrier with the percentage of seats that they've canceled. So both of those markets present some opportunities as the border reopens for us to potentially have more passengers flying out of Great Falls. Right now, I believe the border is scheduled to reopen in late September. That's been moved several times though, so we can't count on that for sure, but that would be a help. On the flip side of that, as many of you have probably seen, it's starting to leak out into the national news. There's massive cuts on the way at all the airlines. I think American announced today just short of 20,000 job reductions. United and Delta will soon be following up, along with Alaska. And so it's uncertain what we'll see in September, October as the CARE funds dry up. And if there is no continued incentive program through CARES, if there isn't continued airline support, certainly the regional carriers will most likely bear the brunt of that, and smaller airports all over the country are already seeing service reductions. I think I would find it hard to believe many airports haven't seen any in our size category. But then there's been some airports that have lost their service altogether. New Haven, Connecticut, for one, just last week lost all their service. And so there are some concerning headwinds ahead. Hopefully we'll know more at the September meeting. The airlines are scarcely a month ahead in their scheduling. They're not really releasing many details beyond that. So we'll see a lot more as we get into the September meeting. We should have some idea what our schedules are going to look like going forward. For the time being, the activity looks pretty good, and hopefully through some miracle, we'll see September and October loads continue. And as we get into next year, I think the other side of this could be really positive for Montana. I think there's a great travel story out there to be told about dispersed activities and wide open spaces, and in particular, even Great Falls' personal brand of Montana, what we call Genuine Montana on the website we operate, I think gives people a lot of opportunities to do things in smaller groups than some of the other concentrated places in the state. And so we'll hope that as we get into spring, there'll be some advertising opportunities. We still think there's the potential for new routes, even coming out of this next spring. United has done some really interesting things on the East Coast. You may have seen they're going direct from many of the smaller East Coast markets to Florida. Their idea is to bypass the hub, lower costs, and offer tourism type flights. And Alaska has recently announced something similar. You may have seen in Missoula, they've added some California destinations direct. That makes a lot of sense for Alaska to do that for a couple of reasons. Missoula is the largest Alaska market in the state. They have quite a bit more traffic than any of the other airports out of Missoula. And if you think about it, California is a huge market for all of the Montana airports, and particularly as you get on the other side of the mountains, Kalispell and Missoula are more oriented to the west coast than are the eastern cities in Montana. When you get over to our neck of the woods, the traffic kind of disperses east and west, where Minneapolis and Denver are important leisure origins, and they're also important business destinations, so the traffic kind of disperses more broadly than it does on the west side. And if you think about Seattle's particular situation, battling Delta in their dominant hub in Seattle, and then battling Salt Lake City and Denver for connecting flights to California, bypassing that sideways connection that adds hundreds of miles and a lot of daytime travel and going directly into California makes a tremendous amount of sense as a way to fortress their activity base there in Missoula, and also to avoid some of the Seattle impacts that they're seeing from Delta. As we all know, Seattle as a tourism destination is probably a little bit tarnished right now. So bypassing that hub connection probably makes some sense. And so those are the types of opportunities we think are out there for even next year. And we're going to be continuing to talk to the airlines over the fall months, which is traditionally route planning season for summer, and trying to get some meetings with those guys to talk about where we are with those airlines. And so tumultuous times over the next couple of months, but we're really hoping to come out of this next summer with a much better position than we were in this summer. So good news on the horizon. FedEx, just to update you on that, we have had some back and forth with FedEx. In fact, they called just this morning. You may recall where we left things, the board had approved over multiple years now a transaction to sell the building to FedEx. We have one more year of the current bonds outstanding, and so however, the lease expired back in June, and so we've been on holdover since June, holding over the terms of the old lease. Laura put together a new lease, which is a complicated transaction, but essentially what we'll be doing is leasing them the building for one more year at the current terms in order to pay off the bonds. In the second year, we'll begin charging them a payment calculation. Basically, we'll be selling them the building at 6.5% interest, and that'll be their rent in the second year for the building. We'll begin charging them a new ramp rent in the second year, which compensates us, it's about $300,000 a year for ongoing capital reconstruction of that ramp. That ramp is now 20 years old. The next 20 years we'll see a lot of panel failures most likely. We already know we have a fairly large de-icing project we need to do to update that de-icing system to a state-of-the-art system. So there's quite a bit of capital costs we need to build into their ramp. The building, we're going to offload that by selling them the building, so they'll become responsible for maintenance and care of the building starting a year from July, or this last July, so well, next July, I guess is the best way to say that. They'll begin owning the building and paying a much lower rent on the building. So that transaction has been put forward to FedEx. They called today. They had initially thought they would probably take out the financing and buy the building in the second year, but they called to say today that they may just stay on that 6.5% interest schedule and buy the building from us directly without buying it out, and which I think is a good outcome for us. I mean, certainly 6.5% return isn't too bad for us.
Environment.
So I don't know that we care. Laura and I worked to come up with an interest rate that we felt would give us a good commercial return, at the same time give FedEx a chance to build some value in that building, and I think the transaction we've got is pretty good. So they were calling today to kind of tell us what they were going to talk to their finance team about. I hope over the next month or so we'll complete that lease and finally finish up what's been a 4 or 5 year negotiation to see FedEx here for another 20 years, which I think we all want. So exciting progress there, and hopefully next month we'll be in a better place. Do you want to add anything to that, Laura?
The only thing was that they do have the option throughout the entire lease they don't have to choose one or the other. So at any point they could buy the building.
Which they are buying the building, but they could pay us out.
Yeah, they're not going to have a choice.
Right.
This is a lease with the option to buy.
Mm-hmm. And then we just have a
that starts
schedule.
next year
Yep.
at the end of the bond, and they've agreed to sign that prior to that occurring.
Yes.
Okay, so that'll happen moving forward next fiscal year.
Yeah, it'll actually be a purchase. Once we get to next year, they'll be purchasing the building. So we'll be handing over the maintenance and everything of the building at that point.
They'll be purchasing, but we'll be.
They don't
signing.
have a choice on
Right.
purchasing it. They're going to purchase it. They can either do it monthly, or they could at any time pay off the building.
Yep. So we're giving them the option, and there'll be an amortization schedule in the back, but if they choose to press the button 3 years from now, we'll know exactly what they owe.
It's a fixed rate then?
Yeah, 6.5% fixed is kind of the way we've set it up. And so so that transaction will be ongoing until we can get it done, but ideally next month we'll be close to getting it done. So exciting news there. As for CARES money, over the summer we've been busy spending that money. The first thing we were able to do is retire the airport debt. That is direct airport debt. We still have the AvMax debt outstanding, which is a state loan that's paid directly by AvMax. We also have outstanding the CFC's backed loan, which is the rental car customer facility charge that pays off the car wash. And so they'll continue to pay, both of those tenants will continue to pay into those funds. We won't retire those until they're complete. The CFC, I think, only has, what, 2 or 3 years left, is that right?
It sounds about right.
Yeah, so we're coming down to the end of that anyhow, so good news there, that we'll be finishing that off too. And in the meantime, we have retired the other airport debt. We've also begun the roofing project. The roofers are up there today pounding away on the roof. Probably another 2 weeks until that's
Yeah,
finished.
about a week and a half.
About a week and a half.
Halfway done now.
Yeah, which will be great. We did have some leaks this last rainstorm last week. The bathroom project, we just got bids in hand this week. We'll be beginning that project probably in the next month or so, Rod, or you
Well, a
think?
couple months,
Couple
probably. There's
months.
some long lead items on the bathroom fixtures, so some could be as far as 12 weeks out.
Oh,
So-
okay. So yeah, so a little bit until we get that project underway. The cost to repair or to renovate the two main bathroom banks was about $350,000.
It's, well, Tobacco was the low bidder at 377, so.
377. So we had budgeted about $500,000 for that. Our hope is to do a lighter remodel on these bathrooms and the bathrooms directly above them on the 3rd floor also. We're hoping to do maybe a little bit less, tear it down with the studs type of redevelopment. Maybe the fixtures we can save, but refresh those a little bit, just give them a more modern look. So we'll be working with the contractor to do that. We still haven't gotten the security truck. We had budgeted about $55,000 in care money for that. Looks like it's going to be closer to $35,000 for the truck plus radios and decals. The snowplow we bought from Des Moines last year should be delivered next month. That's about $90,000 of CARES money, and got the roof, missing one. Nope, that's it. And then we've paid ourselves back for the loading bridge, or we will have paid ourselves back by the end of the month. Basically, that loading bridge we bought in 2019 for Alaska, we wanted to pull that out of the airline user rates. And so what we've done is we're paying payrolls in the operating expenses in order to cover the cost of that bridge, and we're deducting that from the airline user rates. And so we're reimbursing ourselves about $360,000 for that purchase. We've also reimbursed ourselves for the local share of last year's fog seal, and so the airlines won't have to pay for that. All of those things are done. Again, we've used payrolls and large expense items to put those into CARES, and then we're taking them out of the airline user rates. And so nearly all of the CARES money is committed or spent. We have a couple $100,000 remaining, which we plan to use, about $300,000 we plan to use to do design work on the road, next phase of the road, which would include that Airport Avenue B intersection and the intersection where Love's new road is. Obviously, we can't do that until we have Love's road in place. So we may have to reshuffle the capital plan some and kick that one another year down the road. If the Love's building doesn't get under construction next summer, we'll probably have to delay that another year. But nonetheless, we have that money there to design the roads going forward. And then we have about $100,000 in uncommitted funds that we'll use over the next year as we need to. We also have a further $100,000 we plan to inject into the operating expenses to lower airline rates if we need that. Based on the budget, we'll have to see how we do revenue and expense wise. It's already in the budget to lower airline rates with it, but if we do better than we expect, which so far we are on landing fees, that money may not need to be injected in there for the airline rates. But the majority of that $3.9 million in CARES money is now committed. The next thing I'm just going to report on is we are in the midst of an accounting changeover. I'd like to introduce David Hood. He is the new airport accountant working for us. And David, you maybe want to just say a few things about your experience and where you came from.
I have 20-plus years of cost accounting background, and most recently I was assistant professor at Montana Tech. So this opportunity came up and I saw it as a good opportunity, and I'm glad to be here. So how our QuickBooks conversion is progressing. We have elected to start 21 year with QuickBooks. So we have July activity getting populated into the system. We're getting July activity populated. We'll get August activity populated. So it is our hope in September that we will have financial scorecases out of QuickBooks. We have a chart of accounts developed. We are using our auditing firm, AZ, to help us validate the chart of accounts and their experience with airports and QuickBooks conversions to solicit best practices from them. So we're kind of excited about it. We think it's going to bring us some opportunities, and we'll be able to capitalize on the technology of QuickBooks, which we were somewhat limited on the technology of Black Mountain Software. So we're excited about it. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and I think it'll save us a couple $1,000s a year too, in terms of lower cost of operations, kind of what we're thinking, $2,000 or $3,000 less per year to run QuickBooks than we're paying with Black Mountain. So all around a pretty good conversion.
You forgot to mention the most important part. He's also a pilot. We're just lucky that his window faces out over the parking lot and not over the runway, otherwise he'd never get any work done. So, welcome.
Thanks,
you.
Vince.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We've also started our audit activities for the 19-20 fiscal year. We had our first meeting of the Finance Committee last week, and Commissioner Aritz attended, and that was just the auditor introduction meeting, talking a little bit about the regulations that are changing. We updated them on the changes to our accounting procedures. You may recall last year we had some finding on our finding on our capital improvement account. We have our best guess is what 300-400 projects in that spreadsheet currently. That is one of our goals, is to get that monster into QuickBooks, which will be easier for us to administer and track our capital projects in QuickBooks than what we have right now. And so we did update AZ on that. Other than that, it was a pretty uneventful meeting. As we get into, I don't know if the portal's open yet, David, or not.
Yesterday.
So yesterday we got our portal open so we can begin submitting all of our year-end information to the auditor. We'll probably have the second audit meeting at some point, hopefully in October. And as usual, we'll try to bring the final audit to the board in November, if possible. Otherwise, we'll probably have a business meeting right before the holiday party in December to adopt the audit. So that's our normal schedule. Hopefully it'll be a normal audit without too much headache. And I think going forward it'll be much easier once we're in QuickBooks to do those types of things. The last thing I was going to mention is just a construction update. I'll give part of it and then hand over to Rod to mention the rest. We have finished the roadways down at the other end of town, the Great Falls Jet Center end of town. The road's been milled and overlaid all the way down to the Jet Center Lowenbro private hangar entrance. And then we've completed the roadway that goes to the new hangar sites. So we have the fence moved, the new gate is installed, everything is in place to begin selling those hangar pads out. And so we'll be putting up a sign here pretty shortly to let people know we've got open hangar sites. But it's pretty exciting. I think Rod and I were down there last Friday, and finally having some sites ready to go, and being able to market those as utility served and ready for construction is pretty exciting. So ideally, as we finish up the road project on this side over here, that'll happen in the next month or two, I think. But Rod, would you maybe update us on that project and then also the Mang lights?
Yeah, so on the road project, we're probably more than halfway complete. Part of that was the south end John just talked about. Right now we're working from the intersection out here by the terminal going towards FedEx. And then we have some work to do in this dock area out here. It's scheduled to be done by September 10th. So
Wow. We've got some work to do.
No, they're moving along that intersection down here by Holman.
That's
It's
really the hard part.
taken a little bit of
Yeah.
time, but that's gonna straighten that out pretty well, so. They're, had to do some complete removal and rebuilding of that stuff there, so that's taken a little bit, but they're paving that today. So we'll get a couple lifts on that over the next couple days and then continue with the milling towards FedEx. So that'll be done, scheduled for September 10th. McLeese, they're doing the roofing project over the offices on the west end of the building. They were about halfway done yesterday, so they've got probably another half to go up there. That's coming together really well. They're adding insulation and then new membrane up there. And it's an adhesive membrane, which is a little bit different than we've had before. So it actually adheres to the board and insulation they're putting up there. So looks pretty good. And then, like John mentioned, we just got the bids yesterday or Friday for the restrooms. So Guy Tobacco was a low bidder. We had 3 bids: Oswood Construction, Detailed Construction, and Guy Tobacco. So then they were all pretty competitive, within $2,000 to $10,000. So the Mang apron, it's going along fairly well. That's the ramp expansion down there. We've got part of the taxiway closed off down there, which is not a good thing, but United Materials is working along on that pretty well. We should have that taxiway opened up by probably towards the end of September. So they are having some issues over there with concrete mix design they're working through, so that's slowing down the concrete part of the project, but hopefully we'll get this asphalt tied in at the entrance areas for their new ramp, so we can open the taxiway alpha back up. The Mang lighting project for runway 1735, slowly moving along. So that one, Mang is giving us the money, and we're kind of managing that project, and we should have the money in hand, I'm gonna say this week. So once we
They're just giving the money to manage it, right?
Right.
They're paying for the,
No,
They're-
we're gonna be paying the invoices and everything.
but with their
everything,
money.
including the.
With their money.
Yeah, right, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, so they hand us a check, we manage it, do the bidding, pay CH, and then the contractor will be handling just contractor payments, basically. So, once we get the money in hand, hopefully this week, then CH Torm Hill will probably get the project out on the street in the next month or so. And then that project can go to bid. So hopefully we'll still get that done by, well, I don't know, maybe we can get it in this year, but we'll see how the weather and then what our bids are. So I think that's about it. We are pretty proud of what that looks like down on the south end there. So get a chance to
Yeah, I looked at that last week, it looks really good.
look really nice down there, and it's gonna be pretty usable down there, so.
And we're getting some interest still, quite a bit of tire kicking. There's some plans down there, how people might use a couple of those sites. And so, I think hopefully over the next year or so, we'll see some interest. Obviously this is a good time for general aviation, it looks like, and people are concerned about health, safety, all those things. And so we expect there'll be more private flying and having some vacant hangar sites. We're hearing that Bozeman's kind of in an overrun position where they don't have enough room, and I know there's been some interest from folks out of town. They put their plane up here, so exciting, and the timing couldn't be better to have a few empty spots to take advantage of some of that. And that's all I've got on the director's report.
Okay, a lot of good information. Just quick update from United. Obviously, they haven't announced or any furloughs yet. The big thing we've been waiting for is the extension of the CARES Act. If they had extended the CARES Act in its current format, we would not have been allowed to furlough anybody additionally, so the company's been delaying, but as we approach that 30 days prior to the 1 October, you can anticipate that you'll probably get announcements from United on that as well. Our current boarding rates over our busiest time, July, August timeframe, we're still only at 35 to 40% of our normal schedule from 2019. So obviously on the main line things and even the regionals, things have come down a long way on the United Airlines side of things. So without any CARES information, expect updates as we move into the fall. So before we get questions? Before we get into the agenda items real quick, since there was so much, do we have any public comment or questions? Commissioner Moe, any comments or questions?
No, thank you for asking.
You betcha. And Tony, you still out there? Any comments or questions?
No questions.
Okay. All right, with that, we'll jump into our agenda items. Real quick disclaimer. Are there any agenda items that present a conflict of interest and or consequently require a member to abstain or from discussion and or vote? All right, with no abstainers, let's jump into our item, amendment to Love's agreement.
Yes, as the memo says, over the last month or even 2 months, we've been working to try and help Love's get into permitting. One of the issues that came up over the summer is of the stormwater ponds that Love's will be using on their site to drain the stormwater off the site are located up in this corner of the site up here. This is the 911 center here, of course, is the entrance and exit ramps off I-15. The ponds are located up in this corner of the site. This entire site drains to the bottom of the page here. Almost all of the airport land drains that way. But there is a high point in here, a historic high point, and this site unfortunately does drain this way. One of the principles that's a standard environmental principle, been around for a long time, is to maintain historic flow of stormwater. Obviously down on the Sun River, there's watering rights, there's all of the environmental, the estuaries supported by the water that comes from different places. You can't go changing where the water goes when you develop. And so as we got into the very early stages of design with DEQ, they indicated that this site would have to continue to drain towards the interstate, which means we can't use the airport's normal drainages, which go that way, loop around the airfield, and then exit into the Sun River on the side of the hill to the was that south or no, north of the big CMR on the hill there. And so the water does currently come over the side, but when you develop this, you'll concentrate the flows. And so what Love's has in their current development plan is a stormwater inlet and outflow that comes out onto the interstate there in the right of way on the hillside. So there'll be a pipe that comes out of the pond. That pipe will only be used when the stormwater pond fills to a certain level. In case it's an overflow, and then that pipe would be used to outlet the water. In most cases up here on the hill, if you go over to I-State, look at their pond, or the pond we have over near the new parking lot, the Value Park, those ponds rarely ever hold any water because we're on sandstone, layers and layers of sandstone. So as that water hits those layers of sandstone, it tends to migrate east and west rather than continue going south, and pops out of the hillside somewhere. And so the pipe is unlikely to have a great deal of water coming out of it. Nonetheless, it's MDT's policy that they have a maintenance agreement in place to maintain that pipe over its life. What MDT has been telling us is they need a public agency to sign that maintenance agreement because they're worried that somehow they would get hung out for the cost of maintaining that pipe. Obviously, pipes don't require a lot of maintenance. You can put a pipe in a field, and generally it'll sit there without having much issues. But they're worried that maybe that concentrated water might cause a washout or some damage to their property down there. And so they want to have some public agency on the hook to fix that. Unfortunately, as you well know, the airport is restricted in what we can use our dollars for. I'll pass around 49 U.S. Code 49, Section 47133. These are the exact same guidelines that the FAA referenced when we were dealing with street assessments a few years ago. And it really limits what airports can use their money for to 3 things. We can use them for the airport, we can use them for the local airport system in the event that we own several airports, or we can use it for any local facility that we operate that is directly and substantially related to air transportation of passengers or property. Obviously, this type of commercial development does not fit in that matrix. And so we have a number of problems that the FAA cited early on. First of all, the use of airport monies to repair that pipe is off airport. The pipe itself is located on privately owned land that Love's has purchased. If you look at the site here, Love's has purchased everything from the inside of this old highway down to the interstate fence, which is right in here. And so ultimately, they get 6 acres of our property, which is largely in this area. They also add to that about 3 acres of private land that they own outright. So only about 2/3 of the water flow that's concentrated on this site by a private commercial development is actually water flow generated on airport land. So there's a problem with the use of those dollars for that outfall. Number one, it's not on airport land. Number two, it doesn't serve an airport purpose, the pipe itself, the pond itself. And number three, only about 2/3 of the water flow is actually airport flow. So in order to combat that, what we have proposed to MDT, I'll pass around, this is an agreement that they initially drafted, and we've made some modifications to it. Essentially, the agreement says, and if you read the beginning of the agreement, it seems unclear that the MDT understands how this development is going to take shape. And the very first few things they say about GFIAA is that we will design the stormwater improvements, we will coordinate the construction of the stormwater improvements, we will oversee the operation of the stormwater improvements. Obviously, we're not doing any of those things. It's a private development. All improvements will be owned by Love's. I think there's a little bit of a disconnect about how the development is actually progressing. Even though we've talked about this for a couple of years now, there's still a little bit of a disconnect there. And so what we've done is modified this agreement sent to us by MDT to basically say Love's will do all those things. Further, Love's will maintain the improvements. And if there's any damage to I-15, they'll fix the damage at their cost. And then we've added in there some language that says that we'll amend that agreement into the Love's lease. So essentially, we'll take the agreement in whole, put it in the Love's lease, and then hold them to it as a event of default. So we have a little bit of a stick to try and make them maintain those improvements. And then thirdly, in this agreement, what we've said is to the extent that it's lawful, the airport will fulfill any requirements that Love's does not fulfill. And we've told, and right in there, we referenced the same code I just passed out, and we have told in the MDT that it's unlikely that lawfully we can do any of that. It's unlikely that lawfully we can spend any money to maintain the ponds, maintain the outfalls, or fix the damages, or any of those things. However, we're willing to put that in there, and then that'll be litigated at the time one of these things happen. And so if you really look at the pecking order, the waterfall of everything that's got to happen for this to be relevant, number one, there has to be enough water that we actually get to an outflow situation, which is unlikely. Number two, there has to be damage created, or the pipe has to fail, or something else. And number three, Love's, who is an organization much bigger than this one, has to decide they're not going to fulfill their obligations. Number four, we have to be unable to compel them through the lease as an event of default to fulfill their obligations to maintain the pond. And then finally, it gets to MDT would have to come to us and say, well, here's your bill. We would have to go to the FAA and either be told you can pay it or you can't pay it. As it sits today, it's unlikely we would be able to pay it. We've told MDT that, but at least it would allow them to have something in the agreement that they can hold on to. And so when you get down to the fifth claim on potential opportunities, I mean, our chances are better being hit by a meteor on the way home than having to get to that point where we're litigating over whether or not we can pay the bill. And so this is what our last best shot at being able to move this project forward from a solely airport effort. I just don't have any other ideas. I have one other idea, which is on the working session, which I'll present there. We're frankly just out of bullets. And so I sent this agreement as you've received it today. We got it last night from our attorney. I sent it to MDT this morning along with Loves and said, here's how we would rewrite this agreement to make it something we could potentially sign. We're going to have to put that agreement on the board agenda in September and October because it is a new agreement. And so we can't get it done until October. Nonetheless, if everyone could view that as a possibility, it might be a way to move the project forward. I also sent that agreement to FAA this afternoon and said, I think I've checked all the boxes. You know, I mean, we're going to punt. I mean, let's all agree to punt on the issue about whether it's lawful. Let's not ask for an opinion because no money is asked to be expended right now. And then at the time that the bill comes in the unlikely case that it does, then we would all have to determine whether or not it's a payable bill. And so that's kind of how I've tried to address it. It's a more abstract approach, you know, but I think it could potentially work to get everybody what they need. MDT is slow, very, very slow in responding. I have asked them, number one, please provide me another agreement that looks like this so I can share that with FAA and see what other public agencies are signing these types of things. I've not been provided with that. I may have to FOIA that. And I've asked them a week ago whether or not this approach in principle would work. We've not heard back yet, so we went ahead and redrafted the agreement to expedite things and send it to them. It's just a very slow process to get this thing moving. And so in order for this entire thing to be effective, I need to amend the lease, as it says here in this memo. I need to amend the lease essentially to allow us to enter into their property and remedy a problem that might occur. This is a standard provision that I've had in other leases where things like this have come up, where something can harm the airport or create a claim to the airport if the tenant is not doing it. This isn't uncommon on projects that have environmental concerns. It prevents us from having a pending claim. And so what I want to do is right now, and get the board's approval to do it, would be amend the Loves lease that allows me to enter their property, correct something that is potentially wrong with the property, and then charge Loves for it. So I need another tool that I don't currently have in the Loves lease that would allow me to do that. Then the next steps is if this mass of paper is going to meet everybody's concerns, we would come back to the board in October and ask to enter into this three-way agreement. And then, we would ask in October for a vote on that, and ideally that would solve the problem. The only other ideas that have been ventured out as a possibility are the MDT did say they would accept the city as a potential signer of this agreement. And then the only other thing that has come up as an idea was I've asked, is it possible that, well actually there's two, is it possible that some of the future improvements that the interstate needs to make up here on the interchange could flow to this pipe? So in other words, could the pipe be upsized to accept some of those future flows of the roundabout and other stuff that the MDT wants to put up there, such that that cost could be shared, and that would allow them to have an improvement on MDT property. Airports use that type of principle all the time. For instance, if I've done a deal before where a fiber company wants to run, Verizon wants to run fiber through the airport, they're going to run 4 strands, and I say, I tell you what, make it 6, give me 2, and that will be your easement payment. I've been able to get the FAA to accept that before, and so they're a DOT like we're DOT, so I'm fairly confident an approach like that could work. So Loves has approached MDT about that course of action, and then the only other thing I can think of that might work is if MDT would lease that land to Loves for the pipe, and then Loves would have a claim to that land and be able to put the pipe there, and they would pay some type of de minimis rent. And I think Loves has already approached MDT about that. So we've got a few last little straws we can grasp at here to try and continue momentum on this project. But the first thing that we need to do is amend the lease so that we have the ability to enter the property and make changes and then charge them for it, going forward.
So John, I have a question. I think the commission's pretty clear on the FAA rules now. It seems like we've been reading this for a long time. Since Commissioner Mo's on the phone, would she care to address why the city refuses to sign this? Is it something similar?
Commissioner Moe, are you able to hear Commissioner Evans' question?
I couldn't hear it.
Okay. Commissioner Evans was just curious why what the city has an issue not becoming the signatory to back up in case of a problem, since it's city property but privately owned, but it's on the city, within the city limits. What's the city's issue with their being involved in the amendment or in the agreement?
Do you mind if I defer that question to Mayor Kelly?
Not at all. Is he on at this time? Mayor Kelly, are you on board?
Yeah, here, can you hear me?
Oh,
We can't hear you now. Yes, sir.
I think I'm out of line here. So I can't speak officially in this capacity, but I will say this: it's our understanding that the Love's property sits entirely on airport property. We don't have a dog in this fight in the sense that none of the wastewater or the stormwater that generates touches anything that we do. Lawrence Village doesn't touch anything that we do. We've never before agreed to indemnify or be a signatory to a private developer who doesn't take responsibility for potential damage that might be received. So again, I would defer to certainly Brad, Craig Raymond, and council. Our understanding is that this is fully an airport matter, airport lease or airport revenues being generated. MDT's requirement, they may think of us as a potential signatory, but at this point, we're not ready to stand by and do that for precedence reason, and also for potential financial obligations.
Okay. You were very difficult to hear with the Zoom, so I'm going to try to paraphrase what you just said. If I'm totally out of the ballpark, please feel free to correct me. But your understanding is that because the drainage from the property that's being, that Love's is building on, which is 2/3 airport property, 1/3 private property in the city limits, because none of it is city owned, it's privately owned, that you don't feel that you have a dog in the fight and that there would be no reason that you would want any liability of city to provide any backup for those assets if Love's were to default, because you have no personal, or the city has no personal ownership of the property. Is that correct?
That's correct, Vince, as well as this would be a bad precedent for our other developers in our community to see us doing things like that. They would ask for that same type of backup financially from their situation. So again, I'm only telling you what our council has told us and how we've talked about it at the city level in a very informal way. Not met officially on this. There's been no request for this. But the general feeling of the staff down there is that it's out of our region, so to speak, and it's certainly something we don't want to be involved in.
Mayor, if I could, Craig and I exchanged emails last week, and the staff is aware that only a portion of this project is on city property. So about 60%, I believe, of the property is airport property. The other 30-some% of it is private land that Love's has bought, and they've annexed it into the city and platted it.
Right, I know they're aware of that.
Gotcha.
And this is Mary, for clarity's purpose, as I understand it, when you use the word city property, you're
It's within the city limits. It's private property within the city limits of jurisdiction.
Right. And just, you know, by way of comparison, when we look at the other
I'm
two.
not hearing anyone.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Moe, basically what we said when we're talking city property is that the property, non-airport property is within the city limits and under city jurisdiction, though privately owned by Love's.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing anything.
I think we'll have to continue on because it's way too hard to get the communication. I think we'll have to continue on in a different venue. And once we get the vote to move forward on this one, then we'll continue to work with you and Mayor Kelly and make sure that everybody totally understands what we're at, to make sure there's no confusion as to what we need to move forward. And is that good with you, with both of you, to move to table your part of the discussion for now?
May I make one more comment?
Sure.
Here? Can you hear me?
Yes.
I want you to know that the expression "don't have a dog in the fight" can be interpreted a lot of different ways. I think our main concern is the precedent. We are very concerned about this first committee, and oh boy, if you want to get your lawn mowed, have a Zoom meeting. I'm sorry for the background noise.
No problem. We can't hear any of it, so.
Oh, good. But I just want to assure you that we share your concern that at this late date in the process that this developer is running into these hurdles. So we're very hopeful that what you have drafted will work out. And I guess that's all I can tell you at this point.
Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, and just by way of comparison, when you look at the other two corners of I-15, you have Town Pump on the one side over there, and their situation, they have a stormwater pipe, that they have a city pipe where they're able to outlet their stormwater to. So there's stormwater infrastructure there that serves the purpose of this outflow. There, so that, you know, they have a pond connected to a stormwater pipe, and it goes into the city system. On the opposite them, on the other side over there is, you know, the old Flying J, I think is that what everybody?
Town Hall.
What's across the street?
The old Flying J. Yeah.
Okay, I think I have them backwards.
With Denny's.
Yeah, okay, the one with the Denny's has a closed system, what we would call a closed system, and so that one goes into a city stormwater pipe. Across the street from that one, Town Pump over there has a pond that outlets into the MDT right-of-way. And so they have exactly what we're talking about, only they don't have a pipe, they have a riprap field that goes into the MDT ditch. And so as best we can tell, we've asked the question directly, but haven't received an answer directly. There's a policy that was put in place in 2016 that MDT doesn't want to allow that operation any longer of a private company outletting water into their ditch in the event that there would be damage. But it does exist right across the highway from us where that pond outlets into an MDT ditch. So, you know, we're going to have 3 different flavors of stormwater management up here, even on these corners. We've got one that outlets directly into a city stormwater pipe. And of course, they're paying a stormwater fee, or I presume, is there stormwater fees? They pay a stormwater fee to the city for that. We've got one that's outletting into an MDT pipe, or into an MDT ditch with just some riprap, and then we'll have ours, which has to have this, you know, new agreement put in place so that somebody oversees the maintenance of that pipe, which again will be very minimal, but MDT still feels it's important to have that.
Thank you. That was my next question, is what's happening in all the other.
It's all happening.
Do we know, is the Town Pump drainage pipe, stormwater pipe on city property or county property? Is it outside the city limits?
The one with the Denny's is in city property and has a stormwater pipe that goes into a city stormwater
The one on the
system.
other side of the road?
The one on the other side of it is on private land that goes into an MDT pipe.
But is it?
Right in the right of way.
Is
It's
it
not
within the
city
city
property.
limits?
Well, No, that's in the county.
Okay, so it's outside of the city limits.
Yeah, but
So
that-
that's different scenario, but same, I understand, but it's
Yeah.
in the county, not the city.
Yes.
Understand.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Can you clarify for me, so MDT as a public organization can't allow this to happen on their right of way unless another public organization is responsible
For picking up the maintenance if Love's were to default on the maintenance.
And another thing that's been offered, which I frankly think isn't a bad idea, is a performance bond. That was floated at one point. I asked, could we, Love's, would you provide a performance bond? Highways, would you accept a performance bond? Again, that's not been directly answered either. I mean, part of the problem is we're just not getting a lot of communication back.
Because the bond wouldn't have to be that big. I mean, you could build this pipe and the drainage from it for $5,000, I would assume.
Well, I think probably building will be more than that, but I mean, keeping
Yeah,
it in
maintaining
place
it.
and maintaining it will be relatively minor. Most pipes frankly aren't maintained very often.
All right. Kind of got,
We have to applaud those Loves folks on their tenacity for this deal.
exactly.
Most people,
Now
I
we're-
think, would have moved on.
We're now in year 3,
Yeah.
since the lease was signed.
All right, can I get a motion stating that amending the Love's issue to allow us to enter their property to make any necessary, motion to amend the Love's lease to allow GFIAA to enter the property to make any necessary alterations or improvements in accordance with the MDT maintenance agreement, and then charge Love's or its successors or heirs for those costs.
I'll make the amendment, or the
Motion. You have a motion and a second. Can I get a second?
I'll second it, then I have a question.
I have a
So is that contingent, is what we're going to hear in the work session, make this contingent? So this is a contingency?
We'll need it either way,
Okay.
because we'll need this right in order to enable this agreement to have effect.
Gotcha, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So I have a motion and a second. Any discussion, further discussion on where we're at or why we're doing the amendment for the Love's lease? Any other discussion? Okay. I have amendment and a second with no further discussion. All in favor of amending the Love's lease as previously stated, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Tony, I got your aye, thank you. I have all ayes, no nays. The motion
Wait,
passes.
Wait, Tony's
Oh,
talking.
yeah, he said
I
aye.
just wanted to mention at the end of that document, I think you spelled heirs wrong. I think you mean H-E-I-R-S.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Did you catch that, Lauren?
Yeah.
Thank you, Tony, we'll get that fixed. All right. And thank you, Commissioner Moe and Mayor Kelly, for being available for that conversation. All right. Does anyone else have any other items? All right, any airport board comments? All right, how about?
I have one.
Again?
I have one.
Yep,
I
okay.
meant to ask it during John's report. A couple months back, you had talked about the possibility of, I think it was Alaska,
Airlines?
or overnighting planes, or who was it might be storing?
There was
planes?
actually several of them that asked about it.
And did that?
No, ultimately, we didn't get any. The bigger airports, the FAA initially was very hesitant to let airports store airplanes on active runways, but I'm not convinced, as you flew around at the onset of summer, there were plenty of planes stored on active runways all over at the big airports.
Okay.
They actually closed the south runway in Chicago and parked 100 airplanes on a 2-mile runway in the south end of Chicago.
Yeah.
Full-size airliners. And there's some amazing videos of that if you want to go online.
You might have mentioned that somewhere along the line, but I couldn't recall how that had ended up.
And it could still happen. I mean,
Yeah.
there's still enough turmoil in the industry that we could still see some. But I know AdMax reached out to some customers and was interested in getting, that were interested initially in getting some maintenance done and having some planes stored. But as of yet, we haven't seen any.
Okay.
And I think they're far enough.
There's still discussion.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's different airlines. They love the desert for lots of reasons.
Yeah.
And that's where the bulk of the aircraft goes.
And we've actually, at United, started pulling some aircraft out of storage. I think we pulled 140 out of storage that they're putting back into service. And also, they're starting to rotate airplanes in and out of storage for maintenance issues. So I think they've basically stored as many as they're going to, and now they're just gonna cycle airplanes through to keep them in a state of flyable condition.
Always a good thing.
Unless somebody goes bankrupt, obviously.
Well, and that's where we could end up with some planes, I think, is the regional carriers are under a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Even more so come October, and so.
Okay,
Excellent.
thanks.
All right, any other airport board comments? Commissioner Aritz, any comments?
No, I just want to say your internet connection today's pretty bad.
Pretty bad today, did you say?
Things keep breaking up periodically, jerkiness.
Okay.
I wonder if it's a computer.
It's not doing as well as that.
All right, we'll work on an upgrade for next month, because you're very clear, you and Commissioner Moe and Mayor Kelly were very clear, but just weak. So we'll see if we can get a speaker upgrade and an improvement to the connectability. All right, any additional public comments? All right, with no additional comments and no further business discussed before the board, I declare this meeting adjourned. Let's do a 5-minute break, and then we'll come right back into the work session. Thank you all for being here.
You guys are the first thing on the next work session.
Absolutely.
So I heard